has made Sean Combs a little bit nervous.
To me on that when you say, yeah, he looked like the gay homie. I didn't know what you were talking about. If you
No, I wouldn't go to... Do you think this might be too early?
Much detail he could go into about his testimony. And because the 8 people in the videos, the 8 celebrities in the videos were allegedly victims of sex crimes, we know who they are.
John Diddy Combs walked into the courtroom yesterday wearing a sweater over a white-collared shirt and gray slacks. He hugged his attorneys when he got in.
Apologized, saying, "Sorry, Your Honor, I'm a little nervous today."
8 celebrities, 6 men and 2 women. How many of those 8 celebrities were close to being underage or potentially underage?
2 males.
He walked into the courtroom like a mogul. Sharp suit, dark shades, calm expression. Sean Diddy Combs wasn't just showing up, he was making a statement. The kind that screams power without saying a word. Some called it boss energy. But what no one expected was how fast that image would unravel. This wasn't just another court appearance. This was the day the mask slipped. The day the cracks in his empire finally showed. And it all started with a single audio clip. One that would freeze the entire courtroom. One that came from a familiar face with a long memory. 50 Cent. What happened next didn't just shake the courtroom. It sent shockwaves across the entire industry.
Statement is something from, you can tell it was written by a lawyer. Because there's a point where it kind of gets aggressive.
From the outside looking in, Diddy had it locked down. Every move is calculated, every glance, every gesture, controlled. He walked into that courtroom like it was just another boardroom meeting. This wasn't a man who looked worried. This was a man who had spent decades mastering the art of image. From MTV stages to corporate offices, he'd always been one step ahead, turning scandals into headlines, headlines into streams, and streams into millions. As he sat at the defense table, calm and composed, it was easy to forget why he was even there. To some in the gallery, it was just surreal. This was the same guy who used to pop champagne on yachts with Biggie, now sitting stone-faced in front of a federal judge. But the silence beneath the surface told another story. You could see it in the way his jaw clenched every few seconds, in how he never quite made eye contact with the jury. Lawyers on both sides seemed unusually tense. Reporters clutched their notepads like something was about to drop. Everyone could feel it, that quiet heaviness that settles in the room when something big is about to happen. Even Diddy, behind the shades, behind the suit, couldn't completely hide the fact that the walls might finally be closing in. But what happened next shattered that image in seconds. It started quietly. Just a simple nod from the judge allowing the prosecution to play a new piece of evidence. The kind of moment that usually passes without drama. Just a procedure. A clip from an upcoming Netflix documentary, from 50 Cent no less.
Will you go out to the prison and will you visit him just for funsies? I don't know. Look, because you think that right now he can feel like I'm his enemy. Wait, what? Yeah, why would you feel that way? I mean, I'm not his enemy, the federal government.
Some people in the courtroom probably rolled their eyes, thinking it was just another media stunt. But as soon as the audio kicked in, the atmosphere shifted. The static of the speakers gave way to a familiar voice, Diddy's. Smooth, laid back, completely unaware of the setting in which his words would one day echo. The transformation in the room was instant. Phones lowered, pens stopped moving, eyes darted up. Even the most jaded court reporters leaned forward, trying to catch every syllable. It wasn't just what was being said, it was who was saying it, and the context that suddenly made every word feel radioactive. Diddy wasn't talking to a journalist or speaking on a mic at a concert. These were private, off-guard moments, captured and preserved, now weaponized. The kind of audio you don't expect to hear in a federal courtroom. The kind that makes people rethink everything they thought they knew.
But I don't have that thing where we ain't had no thing. I wasn't sending nothing at him, big. If it was on the street side like that, we would be actively doing things to each other. I don't know. I hope things are all right for him internally.
Speaking on?
I mean, at the crib. Because in the statement they mentioned this.
Oh, you're talking Jay.
At first it sounded almost playful. Diddy was heard saying he wanted to go shopping with another man, adding casually, "I'll pay." Light, almost flirtatious. In a different context, maybe it would have passed as a joke. Another eccentric soundbite from a music mogul known for being unpredictable. But then came the line that made the entire room freeze. A strange offhand remark about playing with your booty in Miami. It wasn't just unexpected, it was surreal. In any other setting, Maybe backstage at a party or during a podcast, it would have been shrugged off as banter or clowned on in a viral clip. But this was federal court. And the charges Diddy was facing weren't about late-night jokes or wild nightlife stories. They were about control, coercion, and trafficking. Suddenly, those words weren't just inappropriate, they were potentially damaging. Because in a courtroom, perception is everything. And hearing those lines, delivered in his own voice, cast a shadow that no defense team could ignore. You could see jurors shift in their seats. Some looked confused. Others looked disturbed. What had started as a piece of media promotion had become the centerpiece of a very real, very serious case. And for Diddy, it was no longer just about what he said. It was about what those words suggested.
Now, Fifth, when you continuously call Puff gay, does that affect your relationships in Hollywood?
I don't call him gay. I said,
Let me read it, Fifth.
The moment the audio ended, the silence in the room was deafening. You could hear someone's pen drop. Eyes shifted toward Diddy, and that's when it happened. His entire demeanor cracked like glass. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles bone white, then stood up with a suddenness that startled even the bailiff. His chair screeched against the floor as he shouted, "This is taken out of context." The voice that had always commanded attention now felt desperate, angry, exposed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, the way his voice shook, the way the heat of embarrassment seemed to flush through his face, even behind his dark shades. His legal team scrambled to calm him down, whispering frantically, trying to get him to sit. But the damage was done. The judge called for order, banging the gavel, but the tension was out of control. Jurors looked stunned. Some spectators leaned forward, not wanting to miss a second. This wasn't the calculated Diddy the public knew. This was a man unraveling in real time, cornered in a setting where power couldn't protect him. The courtroom had transformed from a legal forum into a pressure cooker, and Diddy had just hit boiling point. Beneath the outburst was a much darker reality, one that had been quietly building behind the headlines for years. The charges against Diddy aren't tabloid fluff. They're serious federal-level accusations: racketeering, sex trafficking, transporting individuals across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. These aren't misdemeanors, they carry weight. Mandatory minimums of 10 to 15 years, and potentially much more if multiple charges stick. Up until that point, the prosecution's case had leaned heavily on personal testimonies and circumstantial patterns. Enough to raise eyebrows, but maybe not enough to convict. But now they had something far more potent. Diddy's own voice, unfiltered and raw, played out for a jury with no spin, no PR team, no edits. Sure, his lawyers claimed it was out of context, a manipulated clip pulled from a larger, more innocent conversation. But in that room, perception became everything. And with those specific words echoing against the backdrop of sex crimes and abuse of power, context almost didn't matter anymore. The courtroom wasn't just listening, they were reacting. The polished, untouchable image Diddy had maintained for decades was showing cracks, and behind those cracks were serious legal consequences that could alter the rest of his life.
Various charges against him. The three main ones are racketeering, basically extortion, sex trafficking, and the transportation of people across state lines could be a life sentence. The sex trafficking is 15 years minimum, and the transportation for prostitution purposes is 10 years minimum. So
there's really no deal that the U.S. Attorney's Office can offer, and it's certainly not one that Diddy will accept. It would involve decades in federal prison. We're talking about mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years for both the drug charges and the sex trafficking.
The courtroom hadn't even settled before the internet caught fire. Word of Diddy's courtroom meltdown spread like gasoline on dry brush, and within minutes, social media went into full-blown frenzy mode. TikToks began surfacing at lightning speed, with creators analyzing every second of the audio, some even reenacting his outburst in parody skits. Memes flooded Twitter, with side-by-side screenshots of Diddy entering the court like a boss and storming out looking defeated. Instagram stories were lit up with hot takes, while YouTube commentary channels dropped hour-long breakdowns before the day was even over. Titles like "Diddy Cancelled" or "50 Cent Just Ended Him." And as always, the internet is divided into camps. Some fans clung to the narrative that Diddy was being framed, that this was a smear job orchestrated by enemies in high places, 50 Cent included. Others said this was long overdue, the inevitable fall of a man who had dodged accountability for too long. Hashtags like #DiddyTrial, #50 versus Diddy, and #TheTape surfaced across platforms. The story wasn't just news, it was a digital wildfire. And at the center of it all, feeding the flames, that one audio clip replayed, remixed, memed, and dissected until it took on a life of its own. In just hours, the courtroom moment had become internet legend. If anyone still believed the timing of the documentary was just a coincidence, they weren't paying attention. This wasn't just clever marketing. It was a strategic strike. 50 Cent didn't drop a documentary, he launched a missile. For years, he and Diddy had traded shots, subliminals in interviews, petty jabs in Instagram posts, even diss tracks that seemed more personal than playful. But this was something else. The Netflix series, billed as an inside look at hip-hop's untold stories, turned out to be a carefully crafted exposé. And Diddy was the centerpiece. It was filled with blurred lines, unfiltered audio, off-the-record conversations, and moments captured when guards were down. And 50, being both producer and narrator, knew exactly when to drop it. As Diddy's legal pressure reached a boiling point, the documentary arrived like a spark on dry kindling. The audio clip wasn't a leak, it was a trigger, one that 50 had likely been sitting on for months. And the brilliance. He never even had to say Diddy's name directly. He let the footage do the talking. Let the internet connect the dots. It was the ultimate troll turned tactical takedown. A chess move years in the making, now executed in front of the world, and in a federal courtroom. With that drop, 50 Cent didn't just insert himself into the case, he dominated the narrative. This moment wasn't just about two hip-hop icons caught in a headline-grabbing feud. It cracked open something much deeper, something the industry rarely talks about in public. For decades, Diddy was more than a music mogul. He was a gatekeeper, a kingmaker, the guy you had to know or fear if you wanted to move up. He built a legacy of power, influence, and mystique. But now, as that carefully built image crumbles under the weight of legal scrutiny and viral exposure, people are starting to ask hard questions. How many stories were buried because he controlled the narrative? How many careers were derailed for speaking out? How much of the glamour was built on silence? The industry that once protected its own is evolving, and moments like this show that even the biggest names aren't safe anymore. The courtroom didn't just expose Diddy, it exposed the system around him. The layers of loyalty, secrecy, and complicity that kept allegations quiet and accusers in the shadows. Whether he's guilty or not, the trial has become a kind of reckoning. Not just for Diddy, but for an entire culture that's been slow to hold power accountable. And if this is just the beginning, if this one documentary clip is only a glimpse of what's to come, then the industry isn't just watching a trial, they're watching a warning. Diddy walked into that courtroom like a mogul, but he left looking like a man stripped of control. The aura he had spent decades building, unshakable, untouchable, unbothered, collapsed in real time. Not because of a guilty verdict, but because of perception. One audio clip, one outburst, one perfectly timed strike by a longtime rival. In minutes, his reputation took a hit that years of brand building couldn't defend. Public opinion isn't waiting for the judge. It's already passed its verdict. For some, it's confirmation that the empire was always built on secrets. For others, it feels like a calculated takedown, revenge dressed up as a truth. Either way, the result is the same. Diddy's image is no longer his to control. And while his legal team scrambles behind closed doors, the world outside is devouring every development, every theory, every leaked moment. His career might survive. His legacy? That's a different story, because when you've lived your whole life in the spotlight, your downfall doesn't happen in silence. It happens on camera, in headlines, and across millions of screens. Whether this ends in conviction or clearance, the stain left by this trial won't be easy to wash off. And as for 50 Cent, he may have just delivered the final blow in a rivalry that started in the booth but will end in the courtroom. This isn't just a court case, it's a turning point in hip-hop history. But what do you think? Is this the collapse of an empire, or just another setup in a long-standing feud? Drop your take in the comments, hit that like button if you made it this far, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next chapter might be even more explosive.